So this morning, over coffee, I reread this essay by Peter Sloterdijk, Strong Observation for a Space Station Philosophy. It's a brand new essay. It came out in a book called Native Land, Stop, Eject that is edited by Paul Virilio, and which was put out. Virilio is another one of my favorite thinkers. This was put out in 2009. So it's a brand new essay, so most people have never heard of it. So it should feature some new ideas. And it's a very short essay. It's only about 3,000 words. But it's got some interesting things to consider, especially after having talked about Heidegger yesterday and Heidegger's distinctions between Vorhandenheit and Zuhandenheit. I think this essay brings back the implications of Heidegger's distinction in a fresh and interesting way by focusing on the creation of space stations as transplanted world islands into outer space, as Sloterdijk puts it. Sloterdijk is living now. He was born in 1947 in Karlsruhe, and he's out there teaching at the University of Art and Design, Karlsruhe, where he's currently a professor. He and I share the same birthday, by the way, June 26th. He's been publishing books since 1983. His first book was The Critique of Cynical Reason, which came out in 1983 and was a big bestseller, one of the all-time best-selling works of philosophy in Europe. And then he proceeded to follow that with a book about Nietzsche, and then a whole series of books. He's got a very long series of books, most of which have never been translated out of German. A lot of them are in process of being translated at this point. But his main project, his magnum opus, as it were, is the trilogy that he wrote called Spheres. In 1998, Spheres 1 came out, in 1999, Spheres 2, and then the third one came out in 2004. So this is a recent project. And his idea of spheres is that he picks up from where Heidegger leaves off. In a sense, remember that Heidegger had said that being in was the key and crucial aspect of modernity for the modern existential human in a state of anxiety. We are always in a world. This is the mode of Zuhandenheit. We're always using, we're embedded in a life world using tools and instruments. And as Daseins, we are embedded in a life world, always thrown into a particular set of tasks in a particular time and place with a pre-philosophical understanding of our situation. And so this was specifically designed, we were called, to counter the idea from Plato on down through all of Western science, this study of the realm of objects in the mode of Vorhandenheit, which are purely theoretical, self-subsistent entities which exist in a theoretical phase space. And this has the result of unworlding the world, starting with Descartes' idea of this theoretical phase space, and then we get Newton's metaphysical study of the laws of motion. These are all kind of idealized phase spaces that have been divorced from the context of a specific world. So objects in the mode of Vorhandenheit are not just self-subsistent entities, they're actually outside of a particular life world. They're decontextualized. And so anything that is outside of a particular life world, and such objects which are outside particular life worlds are normally theoretical objects, are decontextualized. They exist outside them, and that's the mode of Vorhandenheit. So in Heidegger, the issue of being outside or being inside a world becomes paramount, and for Sloterdijk it becomes the main obsession for all of his works, which he spends studying, especially in Spheres. Spheres 1 is called Bubbles, and it's about what he calls microspheres. Microspheres are the personal dyadic relationships that human beings have in their microspheric worlds. The interfacial relationship between mother and child is a dyadic microsphere, for instance, or the relation that the human being has to the mysterious mythological double, his twin, which Sloterdijk says rather surprisingly was originally the embryo's relationship to the placenta in the womb. The placenta is the original twin, the original double. That's a microsphere. These are all bubbles, microspheres. And the second volume, the Spheres 2, Globes, deals with the concept of macrospheres. Macrospheres are the cosmologies that civilizations create to immunize themselves against the impacts of the real. And specifically also they refer to architectural containers as units that replicate the memory of being in the womb. As mammals, as Sloterdijk says, we have the mammalian line of evolution departed from the reptilian line. In the reptilian and amphibian line of evolution, eggs are laid outside in nests. that are in an outside situation, whereas with mammals, that nest is interiorized in a uterine environment. The eggs are laid on the inside. Woman becomes the first apartment, he says, in this sense. And the eggs are laid on the inside, and a new phenomenon happens in evolution, a brand new phenomenon, which is evolutionarily very late, the phenomenon of birth. And he says that this marks the human being with a memory of what that previous interior uterine environment was like. And so we are always trying to, in our architectural works, reconstruct that interior uterine environment together with its sonosphere. The infant has, the embryo rather, through the umbilical cord, develops through sonics, through sound, a particular intimate relationship with the mother, and so forth. All these things are factors in the building of the construction of buildings and architectural monuments and so forth, and also in cosmologies. These are macrospheres. And so the student of traditional cosmology can recognize in Sloterdijk's two different books here the distinction between microspheres and macrospheres, the old archaic distinction between the microcosm, man as a microcosm, and the macrocosm, as typified, say, by the anima mundi idea in Neoplatonism, in which the earth is encased inside a set of concentric spheres. And then he says those concentric spheres were finally shattered and done away with by the Copernican revolution that comes to a head in the 17th century. Those spheres are shattered, and as a result of that, man after that, Western man from that point on, is in a state of ontological nakedness and anxiety, and proceeds to create a number of artificial substitute spheres. Sloterdijk has this idea that technology is always a prosthetic replacement of natural immunological and biological and social aspects with technologized prostheses that are substitutes for those processes. And so then by the time we get to modernity, in his third book, we get this idea of foam, in which, since there is no longer a single all-encompassing macrosphere, a monosphere, as he puts it, society has broken down into this collection of tiny spheres, each individual creating his own spherical envelope, a monadological envelope. And this image is best exemplified by the image of the apartment building, in which we have these little stacked cells, and each cell is a world island, and these world islands are stacked up in rows to create a kind of architectural foam in which each individual exists in a world island that is very much a replication and retrieval of the ancient monkish cell, the monks that went out into the deserts, the Theban deserts south of Alexandria. That all is retrieved in this concept of the individual world island in the creation of these apartment buildings. And so the modern conception of spheres is foam. In foam, we have collections of bubbles that are subtle cavities that rub up against each other. And so the creation of this social foam, as individuals repelling under other individuals as the result of the creation of these miniature spheres, characterizes modernity and postmodernity. And so he says that his jumping off point was to look back for this at Walter Benjamin's study in the Arcades project of the origins of this situation, and going back to look at the arcades. And he also says that the Crystal Palace in 1851 is the absolute ancestor of all later theme park types of architecture, from whether talking about sports stadiums or shopping malls or these apartment buildings. It all originates with the Crystal Palace, which is a kind of elevating of the bourgeois living room, the bourgeois salon, into a cosmos unto itself with transparent walls. And Benjamin had gone back to study that phenomenon, this dream world of capitalism that he saw coming into being out of this, and out of the fascination of the bourgeois with his own living room as cosmos. The book opens with an essay on that. And then, so Sloterdijk, that's his jumping off point, is to look back at Benjamin and then sort of pick up the ball from that point and follow the evolution of the creation of these world interiors and world islands in modernity. So that's the Spheres project. Only the first volume of that has been translated. It was translated by Semiotext, and as a matter of fact, it's just come out this month from them. So it's now available on Amazon. If you go on there, you can buy Spheres 1 Bubbles. That's available now. The other two won't be translated yet for a couple more years, but they're in process. Highly recommended. It's an excellent book and a great introduction, a great way to approach Sloterdijk's ideas. So that's the background for Sloterdijk's whole approach to this. And specifically I want to focus then on this essay that he wrote called Strong Observation for a Space Station Philosophy. Now he starts off in this essay, it's very short, but he starts off by looking at the classical assumptions of the philosophy of technology, in which technology constitutes extensions of the body. And he specifically cites McLuhan here. McLuhan's book Understanding Media was based on an understanding of the extensions of man, studying technology as prosthetic extensions. For example, the wheel amplifies and extends the foot. In all forms of mechanical locomotion are amplifications of the foot. The electronic world, an electric circuitry is an extension of the central nervous system, and all these different aspects of technology are simply extensions of the body, and therefore prostheses that replace these original biological functions. So every aspect of technology in this classical tradition, Toynbee also talks about this before McLuhan, and McLuhan actually may have gotten it from Toynbee's study of history about technology as extensions of the actual physical soma, the body itself. And so he starts off by talking about this, and he says this is the traditional conception of technology as an extension of the, as a prosthetic extension of the anatomy. But he says this changes now with the phenomenon of the space station. The space station is a world island that has been transplanted into a hostile environment. So it's a type of world island. He makes a distinction between three different types of world islands. He doesn't talk about those three in this essay, but elsewhere he makes the distinction between three different types of world islands. The absolute world island, of which the space station is an exemplar, in which you get a world island that is transplanted into an environment that is absolutely hostile to it. Then you get a relative world island where you have something like Biosphere 2, or greenhouses for plants. These are relative world islands. And then finally we get the third type of world island is the anthropogenic world island, and these are human spaces and habitations like apartments and the basic architecture of the domus in traditional societies, in which human beings can come into form. They come into being. They're like incubators for translating human beings. For in goes the ape and out comes the human in these little incubators, these domestic dwellings. And so those are anthropogenic world islands. But the space station is an example then of an absolute world island. And the reason it obsolesces the older idea of technology as an extension of the soma is because it doesn't just extend the radius of human perception elsewhere into outer space. It actually extends and transplants an entire environment. The entire world round is transplanted and put into an environment, outer space, that is entirely hostile to it. And that obsolesces the traditional idea of technology as an extension of the body. Then so he says that the implications of this are interesting. He invokes Heidegger, and he says Heidegger's distinction in being in time, between being in the world and being out of it, is essential here, because basically what the space station does is it creates a kind of being in the world too. Heidegger's being in the world is being in the world one, that is living on the earth in a particular life world. That's what Dasein does. Living in a particular life world, that's being in the world one, and the space station constitutes a kind of being in the world two, which replicates the ancient cosmological asymmetry between gods and divine beings in the heavens on one hand, and human beings down on the earth. There's a basic asymmetry there in which the god is the strong observer, that is, he's a strong centralized authority that watches over everything human beings do. And the human being has a sense in traditional societies of always being watched over by these divine beings. And so now we have technologized this idea by putting space stations into orbit around the earth, and that constitutes a technologization of the divine eye watching over us. Only now he says the difference is that this creates a continuity. He says this creates a continuity between the old traditional ontological separation of above from below, creates this continuity, and basically solves the old ontological discontinuity by creating this continuity between being in the world one, the ground station, being in the world two, the outer space station. And so there's a continuity there that's especially established through electronic communication. We can send the people on the space station can communicate back to the people on the ground, and the people on the ground now know that this is not belief